Hey, this is David from Movation. This is an introduction to CodePen. And since I'm going to use CodePen a lot in the future on this channel, not exclusively, but a lot, I thought this would benefit those of you who are maybe not that familiar with CodePen, or maybe those of you who want to follow my channel in the future, which is going to cover topics like front-end development and user experience design. And it's a general usage tutorial. It's about the basics, but I do go a little bit deeper than just the basics. It's not just this button does that. It's also the whys of things, why I do certain things. And the things I cover are things like using CSS Bases, using auto prefixer, setting up templates, and using shortcuts, which is something I'm really big on, to save your time by using shortcuts. So yeah, I hope this will be helpful to you, and if it is, let me know down in the comments. And if it's not, also let me know down in the comments, because I'm always about learning. I want to get better, and I'm very receptive to criticism. So just let me know if there's anything you don't like, anything you don't understand. And I really appreciate that, because that gives me an opportunity to learn. So yeah, I hope this will be helpful to you, and enjoy. Hey, this is David from Movation. This is an introduction to CodePen. And I just want to get right into it because there's a lot to talk about, and I want to cover the basics first. So let's go into New Pen. And the first thing we see are three windows that represent what makes up a website, at least the front end. Not the database stuff, not the back end, but the front end. And of course, HTML is the structure or the skeleton of your site. CSS is the styling, how it looks. And JS or JavaScript is interaction, behavior, controlling the DOM, things like that. So I want to get into something right away that is extremely important, in my opinion, that you get into early in your career. And that is using shortcuts to save your time. So here's what I mean. Normally, to start up a document, you would do HTML, open closing tags, body tags inside, head tag, all that stuff. But we don't want to deal with that because it's time consuming, and we want to save our time because you're going to type plenty in your career, trust me on that. So let's do doc instead, doc tab, and now CodePen finishes the rest for us. And this is because CodePen uses a plugin in the background called Emmet that takes care of this stuff for us. Very convenient. And you can pretty much use shortcuts for everything in HTML and CSS. So H2 tab, here's a headline. Use it for paragraphs, so P tab for dummy text, lorem tab. You can use it for links, so A tab. Let's do Google, and you can use it for images, so IMG tab. I mean, you can use it for everything, and even for classes and IDs. So let's just create a class. So let's do dot to make a class. So my box tab, and now we have a class named my box. I'm a box, and you know what? Let's go right into CSS now, and let's style this and use some shortcuts. So normally you would do something like width 200 pixels, all that stuff, but we don't want to do that. So instead we do W200 tab, H200 tab, BG for background and tab. And now very conveniently, CodePen puts the cursor right inside the hex code, so we can immediately start editing it if we want to, right? Really cool. Now you can, let's just center align this because it looks much better if it's centered. But we actually don't have a shortcut for margin 0 auto, so I just do M0 and go one back and write auto. Maybe there's a better way, I don't know. I don't know all of these shortcuts, but I memorize at least pretty much all the ones that I use all the time. And that's the only thing you need. There's no reason to memorize stuff you don't need, right? So let's use a shortcut for border radius to make this box look really nice. So BRS tab. You can guess most of these shortcuts. In fact, I don't really reference the list that often. There's a big list on Emmet's website, which I will link to down below in the description box, where you can study all of these shortcuts. But I usually just guess my way to them. They're very, they're very logical, so you can pretty much guess them. And let's color this text, and the shortcut is just C tab, and immediately we can start writing FFF for white text. And let's center align this text, that is TAC, and as you can see, it kind of makes sense, right? TAC. And let's align this in the middle vertically as well. So that's LH, and the height of the box is 200 pixels. So let's do 200. tab. Oh yeah, okay, so for line height you have to actually write the CSS unit, so you have to do LHP 200px and then it works. So it's not 100% consistent, but almost. So here's the thing. There are no shortcuts for JavaScript for some reason in CodePen. I don't really know why, but it's just the way it is. I have certainly searched for this and I cannot find any information about this. So maybe there is, and if you know of any way to write shortcuts, just let me know down in the comments. I'm more than willing to listen because I want to learn this. I want to save my time. But you can just use something like brackets or Sublime Text if you want to automate this process, of course. Let's do what should we do? Yeah, let's toggle this box when you actually click on it. So let's do that. So let's create a class and let's do bg red and let's do bg tab and let's no, that's an ugly red, so let's do dark red. That looks much better. And let's toggle this. So let's use this keyword and the class list, which is a modern JavaScript feature. So this will not work below IE 10, just so you know. But I mean, who cares at this point? Microsoft don't even support old browsers anymore. They don't even support their own browsers below IE 11. So that tells you something about their priorities, right? And it works. That's fine. And yeah, you know, I write all my code for non-legacy browsers in modern JavaScript, but if I need to support legacy browsers, I just use jQuery. That's what it was invented for in the first place. It's much easier. And yeah, that's how I work. But you can certainly do this for legacy browsers as well in vanilla JavaScript, but it's just a really tedious process. So I don't do it. Now, there's one thing I want to say regarding shortcuts, and that is I don't recommend that you do this in the beginning of your career, like in the absolute beginning stage, because you need to actually be able to write all this stuff manually, right? So you need to have this in your fingertips. But once you actually know how to do this, you get diminishing returns by constantly typing manually. So that's when I recommend that you start using shortcuts. I just wanted to say that so that you don't get the wrong idea here. So there are many awesome features in CodePen, and one of them is that, of course, you can drag these windows open as you want. You can X them out if you just want to dedicate all the space to one window. You can use the tidy function. So let's say that maybe you messed up. Let's just double click to open them again. Maybe you messed up some of your code. Maybe it looks a little bit ugly. Maybe you got ahead of yourself. You can just use the tidy button up here, and it will tighten things up for you, which is pretty nice. I mean, you should always practice writing clean, readable code and all that, but if you mess up, it's nice to have this button. And let's do it over here. Now, you can also change your view or your layout. So depending on what you're working on, you can use this. Pretty cool. So that's it for the basics, if you will. So let's go up and let's save this pen and see how that works. So you click save, and it wants you to create an account. And of course, I recommend that you do this. It's free, and I already have two accounts. I have a paid account and a free account. And I just want to show you how things work in the free account. So let's log in, and now you have the ability to save. Before you couldn't save them, and therefore you couldn't edit them if you went back to them later on. But now you can actually go back to your pens and modify them. But there's a difference here between the paid and the free version. I mean, you get a lot of stuff for free with the free version, but you cannot make your pens private. So if you go in here and you click on private, you can see that it tells you that this is a pro feature. So I think it's more than worth it. I have a pro profile. It's $9 a month, $75 a year. But I mean, you can just try it out in the free version, and if you are tempted, you can get the pro feature. I highly recommend it. So I will probably make a video later on talking about the pro features. So now that we can save our pens, we can also do a lot of other stuff. We can go in and we can say, well, let's just give this a title. So our great experiment. And let's go down here and give our pen some tags. And here's why this is very useful. Imagine if you had like hundreds of pens and you want to be able to toggle or filter through them very quickly and find stuff. So you add some tags. Now we have 3 tags. You can have a maximum of 5. You click save and close. And let's go in here. And now when we click on tags, tags, now we have those 3 tags. So imagine if you have hundreds of pens, it would be so much easier to just click on one of these tags and you could find everything under that specific tag. Really cool. Next up, let's talk about templating, another really useful feature. Let's go up here and you know what? Let's make a new pen. Let's go in here and let's click on new pen. And imagine that you have a specific type of setup that you know for a fact that you're going to use very often. For instance, this is the basics of an HTML document. You need this for all websites. And so let's go into CSS and let's add some maybe normalize as a CSS base, maybe a CSS for a preprocessor. That's the one I use. Maybe auto prefixer. This would be a very typical setup for me. And you know what? Let's add jQuery as well. This is a very commonly used JavaScript library, and it's very common that people would use this as a starting point. So now we go up to settings, and now we can call this starter template, and go down here and tick this box, template. And now when we save it, we go in here and we click on templates. Now we have access to our starter template. Cool, right? And when you go to the front page, by the way, if you go up here, instead of clicking on new pen, you can just click on this arrow and then you also have access to the same template. Pretty damn cool. So let's talk a little bit more about external resources, because I just briefly mentioned auto prefixer and preprocessor. So let's go in and you know what, let's just go to the pen from before and use that as an example. Let's go in here and I want to talk about, you know what, let's just switch this up so it's a little bit easier, like so. Let's talk about bases, CSS bases, because this is very important to get right. Most people, well, maybe not most people, but a lot of beginners don't get this right. They think these two are two sides of the same coin, like normalize and reset. But first of all, there are many different bases, CSS bases. These are just the 2 most popular ones as far as I know, but they are very different in nature. They're pretty much 2 different concepts. So reset, here's what happens. Let's just talk about neither first. What is neither? That is the default browser setting. So whatever browser you are inside right now, in this case Chrome, has its own opinion about how a page should look when it's not styled. So if you haven't done any styling, so let's just remove this CSS, just comment it out, like so. Now you can see that there's actually still some styling going on, and that is the default browser settings from whatever browser you're inside right now. And all browsers have their own idea about how the default styling should look. So what you can do is that you can go in and you can either use something like a reset or a normalize. And here's the difference. Look what happens when you click on reset. This is a very old method to reset. By the way, it has not been updated in years. So look what happened. Let's go back. It removes all the styling, right? But what really happens is that it overrides everything, all the tags, all the elements on your page, and just nullifies them, okay? So this gives you, in a sense, a consistent look across browsers because it applies this to all browsers, right? But it's not, I'm not really that big of a fan of it anymore, because instead you can use something like normalize, which doesn't override everything. Reset is a little bit redundant, but normalize doesn't override everything. It just evens out the inconsistencies across browsers, so you can get a consistent look in all browsers. So that's why a lot of people like to use this as a base. Like for instance, medium.com uses normalize as a base. So when you are using these bases, and this is the same if you're using libraries and frameworks, you should actually read up on the documentation. So go in here and click on this question mark, and let's open both of these and take a look. Because it's important that you are not just mindlessly throwing in these other people's style sheets without actually knowing what they do, right? That makes sense. So let's go to reset, and there's not a lot of stuff going on here. It's kind of redundant, it has not been updated in years, and it addresses a lot of tags that are deprecated and are not even being used anymore. So I'm not really that big of a fan of it anymore, but still a lot of people use this, and I'm not really sure that most people know what it actually does. But let's close this down, because normalize is a completely different beast. Normalize gets updated frequently on GitHub. And it's actually being maintained by two guys, Jonathan Neal and Nicholas Gallagher, and they actually care about this stuff. They care about updating it, and it gets updated like once a month or something. And that's really nice because that means that you can count on it being up to date when you use it. And I really appreciate that. So let's go to the normalize.css, and now you can actually check out what is actually going on behind the scenes. Because when you go in here and you just add normalize, I mean, that's not just a magic button. It actually does something. And this is what it does. And you can actually read up on the comments here, and so you can understand what the hell is going on, which I think is very useful, because you can use this to learn from, right? So yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, I actually use my own base, and that's not for the sake of being original. It's because it's actually a really, really good way to learn. It was an awesome learning process for me, because when you write your own, you are forced to learn how CSS and browsers work. That's required, or it won't work. So if you're a complete beginner, which one would I recommend? You know what? It will depend. If you want a clean slate and you absolutely have to use one, maybe Reset is the best, because it kind of forces you to do stuff on your own because it doesn't hold your hand. But at the same time, if you're a beginner, you probably won't know how to address these various browser inconsistencies, and Reset is not going to help you with that. It's just going to make everything zeroed out. So I would recommend Normalize in that case. But more than anything, I would recommend that you actually start learning how CSS works, because then you won't have to worry about this stuff, right? And then you can build your own. My Reset or my base is just a combination of Normalize and Reset, essentially. So yeah. Now another thing you can do is let's add neither back to the default browser settings. You can do something that is known as, I think, the Barbarian reset. So you can do a global selector, and then you can do P0 tab, M0 tab, and now you remove all the margin and paddings from all the element in your browser. So that's almost a reset, but it's kind of a brutal reset, and it's redundant. It's not needed, but it's another way to reset your page without using any reset CSS. So yeah, I got this from a guy called Hugo Giraudel, who's a really awesome SaaS guy, really good at has a really awesome website, and has also published a few books. So highly recommend his work. But you know what? You should just learn how CSS works. That's the best way to avoid issues. Okay, so let's talk about auto prefixer. Let's just uncomment this and go in here and click on auto prefixer. So what's that all about? Well, just like I said before, that browsers have their own idea about how things should be. Well, it's the same with some properties in CSS. So for instance, let's say that we wanted to use the transform translate property on this box. So let's do, I think this shortcut is TTY. Yes. And let's go in here and just do 50%. And look what happens. Yeah, it moves down, fine. Now this will not work in all browsers because you need a prefix in order to make it compatible. So what you can do is that instead of writing that prefix yourself and wasting code and time, you go in here and you just add auto prefixer. And now look what happens when you click on view compiled. Look down here. It adds the prefix for us. Really cool. Another way to save time. And as you can tell, I'm all about saving time. So the more you can save time on things that you're going to do anyway, but you don't have to do on your own, the more time you will save at the end that you can use for more important stuff, right? So that's why I'm so big on this stuff. And by the way, the reason I stress this so much is because I got into using shortcuts way too late in my career. I was all about writing everything manually for some reason because I felt like it gave me more control or something, but it didn't. It just wasted my time. So I don't recommend that you waste your time. That's why I stress on this so much. Oh yeah, there's another thing I want to talk about just briefly regarding creating your own CSS base. And that is that, as you can see, when you go in here and you use normalize or reset, look down here at the text decoration. Normalize and reset don't take care of this, and I don't really get it because it's really a hideous I mean, text decoration just look really ugly, and you would think that that's something you would remove as a CSS base, right? And the same goes for images, responsive images. This is normal nowadays, but neither of these two bases actually address responsive images. And here's what I mean. Let's first go in and just remove this ugly as hell text decorations. Let's do A. This is part of my CSS base, of course, because I would never use the default text decoration. I make my own. Now, much better. So let's go in and find an image. Okay, so let's do South Park. I love South Park. Let's find an image of, let's just do this, and let's click on the image address, and let's go in here, and where do we have it? Yeah, here, image source, and let's add it in. And now we have this image, but as you can see, it doesn't really scale properly, because look what happens when you try to resize. Oops, let's just close this. Look what happens. It doesn't scale. It's not responsive, but you can write this in your own base, like so. Like so, yeah. And now it's responsive. So now we can see that these bases are not a magic bullet, that they don't fix everything for you. You need to add stuff on your own. So that's why I recommend using your own base, or at least maybe using normalizer and then adding your own base underneath it or something with your own fixes or something. That's what I do, what I would recommend anyway. Okay, so let's talk about preprocessors just briefly. Because here's the thing, you can use preprocessors for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, okay? So I don't use any for HTML, and I don't use any for JavaScript. And here's the thing, here's the reason. You can only spend your time on so much at once. I don't want to overwhelm myself by learning many things at once, so I kind of want to get a great depth of knowledge of the things that I dabble into. And I decided to spend most of my time learning JavaScript, jQuery, and Sass. So when you go to CSS, and like we saw before, you have these different preprocessors, and I decided to bet my money on SCSS. And the reason is simple. It's not because it's better than less or anything else. It's simply because most of the people that I follow in the web development industry, they use this, and that makes it easier for me to communicate with them and read their articles and tutorials and stuff. And sometimes you just need to bet on a horse, because you can't just, well, you can, but you shouldn't just go from, maybe less and then work on that for a few days and then go to SCSS and then go to styles. You will never get any great depth of knowledge if you always jump, if you always switch your methods. So it's not that you shouldn't try something new, it's that you need to give things a chance. And I decided to bet my money on SCSS a little while ago, and I have not regret that. But that doesn't mean it's better, it just means that that's what I decided to bet my money on for right now, at least. So that's that's it. In HTML you have these different, you have Haml, Markdown, Slim, and Jade. And you know what a preprocessor does essentially is just, it makes it easier to get from A to B. So it's pretty much like shortcuts. And you would think that I would want to learn that, right? Because I'm all about shortcuts. Yeah, but I'm also about really focusing on the task at hand. And right now my task at hand is getting really good at CSS, Sass, JavaScript, and jQuery, and I can only do so much at once. So that's why I don't use HTML preprocessors yet. And the same goes for JavaScript. And you can see we have some different ones to choose between here. I think this is really important, that you really grasp the fundamentals of the languages that you use before you start using all these methods and tools. At least that's just my opinion. The last thing I want to talk about is forking, or copying other people's pens. Here's what I mean. Let's go to the front page, and the first thing we see here is a nice looking pen. So let's just click on it. And now you have the ability to make this yours. So you can go up here and click fork. Great, now you have something that you can learn from, or study, or get inspired by, right? But here's the thing. As you can see up here, this uses a processor or preprocessor called Slim. Okay, but I mean, if you don't know anything about this, if you don't even know the basics of HTML, how would you even know how to work with this, right? I mean, of course, you can always click on view compiled, and then you get the actual HTML, because all these preprocessors they convert into HTML at the end of the day. And, all these CSS preprocessors convert into CSS, and JavaScript into JavaScript. But if you don't understand even the basics of these languages, don't use these preprocessors and all these helper tools. And that goes for, I would say, most plugins and frameworks as well. You need to get a strong basic understanding, of the underlying principles of these languages before you use these tools, because otherwise you're gonna find yourself being lost. At least this is my opinion. So once you have a good grasp on things, then you can really learn a lot from studying other people's pens, because then you are actually going to understand what's going on. Even if it's something you're not used to, you will, at least because you understand things on a fundamental level, or from right principle, at least it will be easier for you to learn new things. So that's my recommendation. Don't start forking other people's pens, at least not if they use stuff that you are not familiar with. Get a good grasp on the fundamentals, and then you can start doing that. That's my recommendation. So that's it for now. If you're interested in tutorials about front-end development and UX design, typography, and animation, click the like button and subscribe to my channel, because I got a lot of stuff coming up in the future. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.